Hi, it's Dave Parrott at the Green Barn Workshop. I'm in the annex, which is my office. I've been thinking about some projects I've been doing lately, and I guess you'd say I'm thinking about the philosophy behind doing projects. And I wanted to do this as an introduction to a little series I'm calling Putting Lipstick on a Pig. And the title from that comes from a project I've been working on, I guess, for 7 years now, which is a friend of mine gave me an old backhoe that he used for a long time building his house and so on. And I'll call him Charcoal Guy. And he said, it's in the woods at my son-in-law's house. If you can get it out, you can have it. Which was actually great news to me. I always wanted a backhoe. But it was quite a challenge getting it out. I even had to cut down trees that had grown up in a circle around it, and roughly 10 years had been sitting out in the woods. This is the backhoe as I found it in the woods. It was all open to the weather. There was ice in one cylinder. I got that out, got it to start. It kind of blew out a bunch of dirt and stuff out the exhaust. Here's Tucker, kind of nervous about the process. Eventually, after several long November days, snowy, worked late into the night to finally get it ready to load on a trailer and get it over to my place. So I got started, and I was been working on it, fixing a number of different things on it to get it to run, to get it to run, probably to get it to run better, I guess you'd say. My wife said that when I first got it, when I was working during COVID with it, I'd spend more time fixing it than I'd spend using it. Here it is in one of my first big digging projects during COVID. You can notice that it's connected to the battery charger. That's that red box sitting by the wheel. And it was just starting to be able to be used, but it would break down about every 2 hours. So I'd work for 2 hours, and then I'd fix it for 2 days, and then I'd work for a couple more hours. It'd break again, and a hose would break, the knuckle would break off a joint, that connected to the bucket or something like that. And I was talking to my friend that gave me the backhoe the other day, a couple months ago actually, and he said, I said, yeah, I'm thinking getting the cylinders fixed on it. I got the brake, I'm working on the brakes. Thinking of giving it a coat of paint, fixing it up. And this was over a home brew at a fire pit outside his house, and he said, and he got rather agitated, and he said, that'd be like putting lipstick on a pig, fixing up that backhoe, making it look new. And my other friend that was there with us at the time was laughing. And it got me thinking about kind of like how far you go with projects. Do you do a little bit, and basically I think my friend, Charcoal Guy that I'll call him, his attitude I think on projects would be, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So you use something as long as you can in whatever condition you find it in. And then if something actually breaks where you can't use it, then you fix it. I have another friend, and I think his attitude is, and I'll call him Mountain Man, he is much more, if you're going to fix something up, you do it all the way. You do it complete. It should look brand new. In fact, if it could look like it did when it rolled out of the factory, that would be the best. So I've thought about being kind of caught between those two friends of mine, who are two of my better friends, and what my attitude would be on this. And I think there's something on pretty much any project that you do that where you think about, how far am I going to go with this? So I think about when I'm writing a novel, how far am I going to go researching? How much time and money am I going to spend? I've traveled, my latest book, I traveled to Sweden 7 times. The first trip was to go to places where we'd been as kids, near Sandvik in Sweden. This is my picture of my brother on an island we visited, having coffee with friends. Coffee and desserts was a big part of every trip. This is about as far as you can go north and still be on a road. This is my brother and my nephew and my son Travis. This is in May 20th, and you can see how cold it is and see the glaciers on the mountains behind us. This is an image of Lake Sandviken, which is also a scene painted by my dad in a pastel hanging in my bedroom. I'm not sure my wife was always quite on board with the amount of money I spent on airfare and train fare and food and hotels and that kind of stuff. So why would it be worth doing that? Same thing with the backhoe. Do you spend $1,000 fixing it, or do you spend $5,000 fixing it? A brand new backhoe, I don't even know what they cost. I would guess upwards of $50,000 or $60,000 for a brand new one. This one, when it was new, was probably at least several $1,000s back in like 1958, which is when it was built. But the question of how far do you go? How much do you spend? What are you going to get back out of it when you work on something? If you work on a novel, are you going to spend? Are you going to finish it, publish it to great acclaim, and begin raking in millions of dollars a year, like some famous writers do, like Stephen King or John Grisham, somebody like that? And I think for me, I've had to kind of wrestle with this. Now that with the backhoe, with some of my mechanical restoration projects, most of the mechanical stuff that I fix up ends up being worth at least a little bit more when it's done than when I started. So the backhoe was probably worth $1,500 or so, stuck in the woods. Just and the scrap price of it might have been worth $1,000 just in scrap because it weighs 6,000 pounds. So how far do you go? And I think that's an interesting question. And why would you continue plugging away at something that may not have a financial reward? So that's something I wrestle with any project. So with the backhoe, I think where I'm currently at now, I've noticed that in the last year or so, when I take something off to fix it, I'll take it into the shop and I'll maybe get the rust off the parts by putting it in a soaking solution like I saw Adam Savage using on his channel. And then maybe I'll sandblast that part, prime it. If it's bent, like a piece of bent metal, I'll straighten the metal, prime it, paint it, put it back on the machine. So now I've got, and I may show an image related to this, now I've got these bright, shiny parts on a very old, rusty machine. And I think this applies to other things, to other creative projects. Like if you're doing a book, I think, how far do you go with editing? How many rewrites do you do? How soon do you put it out there? And I'm not sure if this applies to, I think it would apply probably to video projects. How much editing do you do? Do you do beautiful intros and outros? Do you do arrows that point at things? How much pre-planning and so on would you do? So I think a lot it applies to a lot of creative things, and I've kind of wondered at my own motivation, like why do I keep going on something when most people, I don't want to say most people, when some people might give up. Why would I keep writing novels if I'm not making millions of dollars? Why would I keep working on an old MG when I heard a joke by a guy, not exactly a joke, but a funny comment by a guy in Road and Track where he said, I restored this Porsche, and by the time I sold it, I made my usual $3 an hour in labor. And that's pretty accurate. You might, you might get your parts back, but you're not likely to get your time and money back. There's a joke in toy train collecting where the guy says, when I die, I hope my wife doesn't sell my trains for what I told my wife I paid for them, which I think is pretty funny. So there's all these things to balance. Time and money are always something you have to balance. What you're going to get out of it. And I think for me, the thing I think I find satisfying, one is I think when I get something finished and it looks good. What I mean by that, like if you're working as a carpenter, you start out maybe at the beginning of the day with a deck, and at the end of the day you've got a house framed. And I've been on crews where we framed pretty much a whole house in a day, stood up all the walls, put the trusses on. It's not finished, but you stand back at the end of the day and there's a real feeling of accomplishment. And I think that's true of say a restoration of an old car or something like that. With a novel or a story, I think rereading it at some point in the future or giving it to friends and getting feedback on it, I think is part of the motivation for me. But I think also what keeps me going in the middle of projects is that sense of learning things, the sense of new discoveries. So working on an old MG, I remember taking a clinic on how to fix transmissions, and they would point out that at the factory they had put things together in a certain way, that that's the only way it could go back together, so you couldn't make a mistake. And learning that, it's, oh, that's really pretty cool that you can't, they made it so that you can't, that the notch in that gear will not fit in any other way than if you do it right. And you might wrestle with it to try and get it right, but then it's like, oh, this is what they meant to do, or this is the way it's meant to go together. So I'm gonna try and add some videos to this video series on the tractor, but I also want to relate it to some of the creative stuff I try and do with the writing or other creative outlets. And I hope that it may be something that you find interesting. Thanks a lot.